G'day guys, on today's episode we'll be giving you a rundown on one of our most popular kits, the PX Ranger Snorkel. So our PX Ranger Snorkel is available in two options, the Fabulous Fab range and the Day One range. The difference between the two being that the Day One range has the world's lefters laid and a Day One end cap instead of a Fabulous cap. To give you a bit of background into the story behind where our Day One snorkels have come from, as you can see in front of us, we've got the evolution of our snorkels laid out. We started here, not seamless, purge welded, no filler wire. There was no end cap in these snorkels either. We just used to put a bit of 1/2-inch bar in just to stop things from being thrown down. As we progressed, we transitioned into offering seamless snorkels, and then as we started seamlessing them, we also started purge welding them for the best possible outcome and the most strength in the weld procedure as well. And then after a while, we kind of thought, well, this is a good option because it's a more budget option. Because we spend less time on it, we're able to get it out the door heaps cheaper. So then we thought maybe we should bring the not seamless range back in, but as its own product per se. And we thought, well, you know, how are we going to do that? And we come up with the name Day One because, you know, it's your Day Oneers, it's where we started, it's non-seamless, but to make sure that we carried the rest of our quality back into the cheaper range, we come up with the Day One logo, which is a laser cut end cap in this snorkel. So it's essentially the same as the Fabulous snorkel with having the laser cut end cap. We use the same laser cut and countersunk bracket as the Fabulous snorkel. The only difference between them is the not seamless weld, and that is why it makes it the cheaper option, because it's just less man hours in making it. If you're like us and you're a die-hard car guy, you will probably think that the Day One logo looks familiar, and you'd be right because it is. We've essentially used a spin-off of the Year One Camaro logo, which you would have seen in Too Fast, Too Furious.
Hold on!
While we're here today, we're going to fit both snorkels to the car just to show you that they are identical and that there is no differences in the procedure between the two. So if you're interested in checking out either of these two on our online stores, click the link up here and it'll send you straight there. So in both the Fabulous Fab and the Day One snorkel kits, you'll be provided with comprehensive fitting instructions. These give you a full run through on how to fit the snorkel, dot point wording, so that way it's nice and easy to read. There's pictures on how to mark out the template. Template comes in the back, and it also comes with fitting instructions and aftercare information on water ingress. It comes with an O-ring for around the top of the snorkel, which we'll run through later, silicone joiner, hose clamp for the snorkel, and the pinch weld for the guard hole, as well as the fixings that you'll need to install it. So as far as the tools that you'll need to fit this snorkel, a Phillips screwdriver and some pick tools to remove the guard clips, a drill and some drill bits to drill the pillar, and for the hole in the guard, which you'll also need the air hacksaw for. We use a die grinder with a spiral band to clean up the hole in the guard once you've cut it. With the zinc paint to paint the guard. You'll also need an air blower to blow down the car so it's free of any metal shavings. We use a hose clamp tool. You can use a flathead screwdriver. A nutsert gun, we use a Worth ratcheting one, but you can also buy a cheap one from Trade Tools or Bunnings, which will do the job just fine as well. And Knipex side cutters. Shout out Snap-on. Man, the money I've spent with those, surely they could give me more than a t-shirt. Let's get into it. So we're going to start off by taping up the guard. As far as your tape selection goes, we use a low tack painter's tape. That way it's nice and easy to pull off the car once you're done. Once you're done taping the guard, move inside and tape up the pillar, because that's where you'll be drilling the holes to mount the snorkel. And then while you're going, you could put a bit on the outside as well, just for a bit of extra protection. Alrighty, so once you've taped up the guard, it's time to move on to marking out the template. All of the measurements are written on the template and detailed within the instructions. So when you mark out the template on the PX Rangers, we always hook the tongue of the tape right on top of the vent. So we use a small Stanley tape, that way the tongue is as small as possible. We have had instances in the past where people have used a Fatmax or similar, and it has changed how the marking out on the guard works just because of the physical size of it. So nice and small tongue on top of the guard, and then come forward with your two measurements. Once you've got your 2 forward marks, you can go and mark your 2 down marks, and that will become the front and back point of where to mark out your template. So pushing the tongue of the tape underneath the bonnet with the bonnet fully closed, mark down your 70mm, and that will become your intersecting line on both your front and your back point. So these points are the front and rear points on your template, and if they don't line up, then obviously don't cut the hole. So the template we provide you is an A4 sheet of paper. So when we cut the template, we cut on the very inside of the black line. So that way when you apply the template to the guard and you put a black line around the outside of the template, you'll end up with the exact same size hole as what we do. Here's one I prepared earlier. So once you've got your template cut out, put it on the guard, line your holes up. You can use magnets to help you position the template while you draw around it. And then with a fine tip or semi-fine tip Sharpie, draw around the outside of the template. So after you've marked out the guard, the next thing is to mark out the bottom of bracket measurement on the pillar. We'll push the tongue of the tape against the pointy top edge of the guard and measure up 130mm. That measurement will give you the bottom of the bracket and will also coincide with lining up the weld joins on the snorkel. So now we've taped the guard, template on, you can pop the bonnet and then start removing the inner guard clips. With the PX Ranger snorkels, you don't have to remove the whole inner guard. There is a series of clips, and with the standard front bar there is more, but remove the clips all the way back to the mud flap, because when you pop the inner guard down, it will pop past the back of the guard and will allow you enough room to get your hands up in there and work without having to spend the whole time to pull the whole inner guard out. So to remove the inner guard, grab up the top and pull it down and around the strut, and then put your hand against that lip, give it a shove, and then just one more pop. And that's it, the rest of the guard can stay in. So now that we've got the inner guard out, we're going to move on to cutting the hole in the guard. We drill a hole on the inside of the template so that way you can start your air hacksaw in it. While you're doing this, obviously wear eye protection. So once you've cut it, just grab that out so you can chuck it in the bin. And as you'll see, like I was explaining before about how to cut and mark out the template, we just cut straight back through. So essentially you're cutting back through the center line of the line that you've drawn every single time. So that way the hole doesn't end up any bigger or smaller than what it should. Once you've got it cut, just grab your spiral band or a file and clean the hole up. So once you've cut the hole on the outside of the guard, there are 2 tabs under the inner guard that Ford put there for the factory snorkel. This one up here you can reach and you can just fold it down. The one next to the airbox we'll jump under and we'll cut it off with the air saw. So once you've cut the tabs off, you can remove the factory snout off the front of the airbox by undoing the hose clamp in the engine bay. Depending on the age of your car, it's not a bad idea to spray the factory hose clamp with a little bit of inox or CRC. We've found that they can go rusty and then seize up halfway out, which results in you having to pull the airbox out to get the hose clamp off. So when you're undoing the hose clamp, don't undo it the whole way so that it springs open. We'll go till the tail goes the whole way down so that you can't see it anymore. That way it is big enough to allow you to put the silicone joiner on it, but you won't have to worry about pulling the airbox out to try and put the hose clamp back together. So you want something like that in the engine bay, so that way it's big enough that you can just put the silicone straight into it. And now that you've undone the hose clamp, you can wiggle the factory plastic snout off of the airbox, which is just that item there, which goes in the bin as well. Now that you've removed the factory intake snout, put the silicone joiner on. When you slide it onto the airbox, nip the hose clamp up so it's firm, but you can still rotate this because that's an important part to be able to get the snorkel in the silicon nicely. So the next part of the kit is to install the pinch weld on the guard, so that way we can test fit the snorkel. Now the pinch weld is directional, it does have an inside and an outside. If you put it on one way, the pinch weld will sit up off the guard. However, if you turn it around, the pinch weld will sit down and bite into the guard. We always apply it so that it's biting into the guard because that way it looks best. So when we cut the pinch weld, we always leave about 5mm in length past where you started. That way it will bite into the pinch weld nicely and you won't be left with a gap between the two. Just push it in like that, roll the pinch weld down, and that way you'll end up with a nice join there. Now that you've got the pinch weld on, it's time to test fit the snorkel. So to help you get the snorkel in the silicon joiner, we lube up the end of it. The cheapest and easiest thing to grab is some cooking spray. Just spray a little bit around the end where it's going to go into the silicon. That way it'll make it nice and slippery and easier to deal with. When you're fitting the snorkel, if you are doing it by yourself, put your hand under the bracket. That way you're not going to risk dropping the bracket on your A-pillar. Once you've got it in, just pop the door open, slide the bracket in, close the door. That way you can come back and check and see how you're sitting. Now we've fitted a day one snorkel to this car for the video and you'll see these two weld joins. However, the weld join that's here should be fully hidden by the pinch weld. So if you need to push into the silicon joiner further to get rid of the last join, do that now before you mark the pillar. So once we know we're in the right spot down the bottom, we'll cross-reference with our bottom of bracket measurement, which you can just see there. We're in the right spot, so now we'll go ahead and open up the door and mark the pillar up. Best way to do this if you're doing it by yourself is just to pop the door, put your arm inside and grab the top of the snorkel. That way you can swing the door open and mark the pillar. This is much easier with two people, but if you don't have that option, it is doable by yourself as well. Now, when you mark the pillar, always mark closer to the outside edge than the inside edge. You can put the bracket down there, however, that reduces the gap between the bracket and the door and can risk pinching the door rubber and over time tearing it. So we always go closer to the outside edge. If you want to double check this measurement, you can put your tape measure here, mark back 8mm in both spots, draw a dead center line, and that way you'll know you're not too far out or not too far in. So when you're drilling the pillar, be very wary of putting too much pressure behind the drill because as the drill works its way through, it can go the whole way through and put a pimple, like an upwards dent in the pillar. So what we do is high speed, low pressure, that way you won't risk damaging the outside of the vehicle. Once you've drilled them, grab yourself a bigger drill bit to deburr the hole. When we deburr it, we also put a very light countersink in there, so that way when the nutserts go in, they sit flush with the skin. So you can pull your tape off the pillar now. All right, so now you've got all the tape off, put the nutserts in. Make sure that when you squeeze them down as firmly as possible, so that way over time, they won't risk rattling loose. So you'll see now that once the nutserts are installed, because of the light countersink we put on there, it makes sure they're nice and flush and they're not going to protrude past the skin. So now that we've drilled the pillar, we're going to paint the guard. So just pull your pinch weld off, set it aside, run some more tape up the top and then paint it with some zinc paint just to make sure it's not going to rust in the future. While you're here as well, make sure you paint the two tabs that you cut off. Now we're going to stand here and watch the clock while the paint dries.
5 minutes later.
So once your paint's dried, peel the tape off, and then you can reapply the pinch weld, and then you can refit the snorkel for the last time. It's the same as what you did last time. Snork back in the hole. And the silicone, pop the door. Before you head inside, make sure you grab your tools. When you're putting the bolts into the nutserts, make sure you start them by hand first, because you can risk cross-threading them. So now that you've got the bracket done up, you might notice that the snorkel seems to be sitting up off the car a little bit. And this is pretty normal. It happens on every snorkel that we fit. So to counteract this, grab the snorkel here with this hand and put your other hand up underneath the guard and just give it a twist. That way it rolls it into its home and then it flows with the guard nicer before you do the hose clamps up. So move into the engine bay and do the hose clamp in the engine bay up first, and then put the one on underneath your guard. So once that hose clamp's tight, you can refit the inner guard, put all your screw clips back in and give the car a good blow down with compressed air and a good wipe down. So to refit the inner guard, I'll put the piece up. The first piece that we pulled down is the first piece to go back up. So push that back up, pop the inner guard back up in behind the tabs. And if you've got a bull bar, just slot it back into your bull bar. Then now you can put the clips back in and you're done. So just to wrap up, guys, that's been an install on a PX Ranger. What we're going to do though quickly is pull the day one snorkel off and put the Fabulous snorkel on, just so that way you can be sure that the quality and the consistency of the lines, the angles and the fitment is coherent between the two products.